All right. So we are so grateful to you're joining us online with the Iowa Farmers Union. We're having our virtual town hall with Senator Grassley this morning, and we have had a long, wonderful relationship with Senator Grassley, and we are very grateful that he's joining us for our conversation today. You've taken the time to answer some questions from our membership, and those questions come directly from our members. They're open to we're encouraging our members to put additional questions in the Q&A box, and we will but I'll moderate those, Senator, and ask you those questions. It's a dramatic time right now for farmers. We are experiencing farmers are in a time of low prices and other challenges of getting the growing season started, but in addition to that, we've seen dramatic firings at USDA and other USDA facilities here in Iowa, and freezing of funds here in Iowa. And our farmers are very concerned about that. It's hitting their bottom line and ability for them to innovate on their farm with conservation funds and with projects to build their connection with consumers and their communities through building our local and regional food system. And we're also talking a lot about tariffs. And I know that these conversations are happening with you all the time, Senator. So your presence with us here is very, very timely, and we appreciate you so much. We know that the Farmers Union really values your presence. So would you like to start with some comments about your thinking this morning on some of these important issues that you're facing?
I think I'll start with the 5-year farm bill. Should have had one in 23, should have had one in 24, so we're on a 7-year farm bill. Certainty for farmers looking ahead 5 years is very important. And I hope that the new Congress can deliver a 5-year farm bill. I and Senator Ernst are members of that committee. We had our first hearing this week. I don't think we're going to end up having 10 or 12 hearings like we did 1 and 2 years ago. I think fewer hearings. We do have left over from the last Congress what you call a Democratic framework, a Republican framework. We also have the bill that was a bipartisan bill that was out of the House Agriculture Committee to give everybody some idea of where we're headed. I can't give you any more of an update on that because we haven't even had a Republican members of the committee yet. Mostly Senate getting started with the new Congress is taking most of our time. I had the privilege of visiting with the new Secretary of Agriculture, Mrs. Rollins, and I never knew her. I've known her for about 8 years, but not much for the last 4 years. But the first Trump administration, I knew her because she was working on an issue that I was very much involved in with Senator Durbin of Illinois called the First Step Act, which was a first in a generation rewrite of the criminal justice reform to give people that were unfairly treated under a very tough criminal law of the 1990s, to give them a second chance to spend less time in prison because they were probably over sanctioned. So I worked with her on that, and we were successful in having the president sign that December of 2018. So that's how I know her, but I feel like I know her very well. I haven't had to really engage with her much in the 2 weeks that she's been Secretary of Agriculture, but I feel if you want me engaged with her, on something, let's say 3 months from now, I'd be happy to do that and messages. But I think as we go with the 5-year farm bill, I'll have more to do with her. Now, I think I should stop there. I could talk about trade. I could talk about the issues dealing with the freezing of federal money and stuff like that. But let's go to your questions.
Well, we have a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to them all, but we know that this is just the start of the conversations that our folks will have with your office. And you've been very, very responsive to our folks over the years, and we're very appreciative of that. Probably the most number of questions that we get that we've gotten in, Senator, deal with the USDA firings of employees and suspending of funds. A lot of these are conservation funds. A lot of these are local and regional food system supports to build our connections with our community, with the local and regional food system. What farmers feel a little bit like when they've signed a contract that the rug's being pulled out from underneath them. What are your thoughts about freezing of those important funds to bring conservation innovation onto the farm?
Well, I hope in the end, but this is only a hope because I don't know where this is going to come out, but we're told that it's a 90-day review of expenditures. And obviously, if it was a total dilution or elimination of those monies, that would be catastrophic for conservation. It'd be catastrophic for the family farmers, particularly the progressive family farmers that want to do everything that they can for the environment. And I don't mean to advance these up-to-date practices for conservation. But I don't know how I can answer your question any better than to put it in a little perspective, although I'd have to say it's more abrupt in this administration than in previous administrations, but almost every new president going into office has some abeyance of expenditures or hiring or regulations going into effect. And I just think it's a little more abrupt this time under Trump than it was Trump the first time or any other president I've served. But I think that a lot of people feel that we need a real deep look at every penny that's being spent in the federal government. And I think that's what the president's trying to do. And I believe that I'd be able to tell you more at the end of 90 days, but this is all I can tell you right now.
Yeah, one of our farmers wrote a question because his family is discussing ways to be in the partnerships for climate smart commodities, for instance, and it's a way of implementing practices that would be necessary to get to lower carbon feedstocks and find new markets. And a lot of farmers are in this situation. What are we doing to help them keep their pledges, keep the USDA pledges to those farmers?
Well, and again, that's a question that follows up on your first question. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, what we do is we convey to the Department of Agriculture all of these concerns, but we're not getting an answer because I don't think that until this review's done that you're going to get much of an answer. But we've also saw plenty of examples in other departments of government that you just can't justify some of this expenditures that's been exposed. Comic books for people in Ecuador is one example, and things like that. So, I think we got to protect the taxpayers and some review and some money that probably shouldn't be spent, being spent, like a massive amount of subscriptions for publications that nobody pays any attention to is just one example. So for your member that had that question, we communicate to the Department of Agriculture these concerns, but at this point we're not getting much of an answer. And by the way, this is an opportunity. Sitting beside me here is Eli Harberts of Grundy Center, farm boy that's my agricultural legislative assistant, and you should write his name down and call him when you have issues that you want to bring up, because a lot of times your members know things that are bad that we don't know about. We wouldn't know about this calls that you're having on conservation only because people called us.
Well, absolutely. And time is really tight. We will take advantage of that opportunity because farmers are making final decisions for planting and we're preparing for the growing season line of financing. That's a very critical time. And we're getting time is getting short to make some very important decisions on the farm. So I hope that these 90 days can be much shorter, because I'm afraid farmers are feeling the heat faster than 90 days are coming upon them. Uh,
I'm going to tell everybody at the Department of Agriculture in my part of the state, people start planting corn around April 15th to April 20th.
that's very true. That's very true. You know, a couple other concerns that have been brought up about these funding freezes. For instance, um, we've heard of funding freezes at the National Weather Service, and we're getting into a season for violent weather in Iowa. And so, what can we do to make sure that we're getting the word out about weather issues that are so important to farmers?
We not only have that, but in some of our TV in the private sector, we've had some consolidation between weather reporting at various TV stations, wanting to unify it and get maybe Iowa weather from Atlanta, Georgia, if you can believe that. So we've had to bring that to the attention. The same way we'll bring this to the attention, because you ought to know when there's going to be a natural disaster facing you, whereas the derecho of 3 or 4 years ago, or a tornado just down the road, 5 minutes away.
Absolutely. So we've also know that we have some great research facilities in Iowa, some USDA facilities. We've heard a number of reports about whether we're making sure that even the research animals are being taken care of, and that the research seed is being properly attended to, so we can make the proper plans to do good research in Iowa. What can we do to ensure that all these resources that farmers depend on are actually being put to good use? Um, when we see that those things happening on a neighboring farm, we think that that farmer's not doing their job. And so it's a big worry when it's happening at our USDA facilities.
Well, one of the places we had to intervene at Iowa State University, and I assume it was a federal laboratory there, was
Mhm.
a person that was laid off recently, was a person working on avian flu. And everybody knows how the bird flu is a very serious problem for the consumer, with the price of eggs going up to $8 out here at least, and things like that. So that I don't. All I know is we made that intervention because of the problems with bird flu. Uh, I could ask my staff here whether or not that person was put back on or not, but I don't have that update for you right now. But also another thing is, the question you're asking is very closely related to things I'm going to try to get done in the Farm Bill, 5-year Farm Bill, and that is two areas where I thought we ought to have more funding. One is for agricultural research, because that sort of research has fallen way behind other government-funded research. It's non-agriculture. And the other one would be money for foreign agricultural sales, because exports are very important for the prosperity of American agriculture.
Well, and you know, related to all the things that are happening at USDA and our other important federal funding projects in Iowa, related to that, what does the courts have weighed in that we had to stop some of these freezing of funds. And we're not sure that the administration is at all complying with some of those federal orders. Where do you step in and say these orders need to be followed in order to make sure that the essential services are getting to our farmers?
Okay, uh, you'll have to repeat the whole thing because you came cut out on me.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Senator.
Well,
So,
it could be at my end, not at your end.
well, the question that one of our farmers is asking, when the courts have ordered some stops to the federal funding freezes and making sure that these contracts are indeed fulfilled by the government to farmers, if the administration isn't complying with them, where does Congress's role step in to make sure that those federal orders are being complied with?
Well, I expect the President of the United States, whoever he is, whatever party he is, if the courts say you can't do something, you can't do it. And I expect the money to flow as a result of it. Now, any administration, Republican or Democrat, has a right to appeal, and I assume that some of these are being repealed, but some of them are not being appealed. In fact, out of 90 that have been filed so far, I think that just a few are being appealed. You can't appeal all of them at one time, so that money should be flowing. Okay, then we're talking about the judiciary branch being a check on the president. Congress has the same responsibility. I call it oversight. You learned it in eighth grade physics or eighth grade civics as checks and balances. And I think I have a very good reputation for oversight. And so what you do, you can do several things. You can make phone calls to the agency or the specific program you're talking about. You can give speeches on the Senate floor. If we had a lot of nominations to hold up, that you can do when you're trying to keep a check on the executive branch of government, and you can use all of those tools or some of those tools.
Well, and speaking of those tools, Senator, uh, one of our farmers is asking about the role of the USDA Inspector General, and their role has been very important in making sure that we have efficient government USDA programs. But yet, it's it's really cast into doubt when that person can be fired
Yeah,
by the president. Uh,
sure.
what can we
Okay.
do to ensure that those inspector generals get to do their job without being interfered
I made it known to President Trump through letter that was also signed by Democratic Senator Durbin of Illinois, that he under law that I got passed about 4 or 5 years ago, that you couldn't fire a IG until after 30 days, and that 30 days period was for the president to send us a letter why he fired. The president has taken a position that is unconstitutional because of his power as president of the United States to faithfully, I guess you call it the executive powers of the president of the United States being vested in one person, the president of the United States. And so we've let that known. Now, I'd have to say this, I don't disagree that the president has the right to fire anybody he wants to in the executive branch of government, but he's got to do it within the law. And in the case of the IGs, he didn't do it within the law. There's another case where he's fired somebody that now is before the Supreme Court. So we'll let the courts respond whether or not the president has violated that law. But I'm going to stick to the fact that IGs, inspector generals, are supposed to be independent of the agency that they're a part of, so that they can ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse and things of that nature, and cooperate with those of us in the Congress on our oversight responsibilities, and do it that way. But on the other hand, I'd have to say that maybe in the last 20 years, I've led the battle to get rid of some inspectors general myself, and most recently, when the nominee to be Secretary of Defense was in my office before he was finally confirmed, I said, you need to get rid of the Inspector General. Of course, that Inspector General was one of those that's fired. But when Pam Bondi, Attorney General nominee, was in my office as a nominee, I said, the president wants to fire all these IGs. He shouldn't fire Horowitz in her department, because he has done so much to help me expose a lot of fraud and political weaponization of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and he should be kept there, and he wasn't fired.
Well, that's very important, Senator, and I appreciate your working across the aisle on that important issue. We're getting a few questions from farmers asking, where can we see the Iowa delegation speaking with one voice? All six of our congressional delegation, maybe with our governor, maybe with our Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, on the impact on USDA firings and funding freezes are having on our farms and our food system work here in Iowa. Can we speak as one voice on these things?
About the only unanimity you actually see is something that where we'd all sign a letter to a certain person in the executive branch, or we'd all appear on the same panel to hear that one voice. Otherwise, it's just common sense. You're going to hear six different voices, not necessarily different, but you're not going to have them saying exactly the same thing. You know, what do we do now?
Well, we're doing okay, Senator. We have a very good group with us today, so I'm sorry for having a little bit of technical difficulty. But I appreciate you hanging in there with us through that. Um, we are getting a lot of questions about trade issues and the go it alone approach that the administration is taking. It's resulting in lower commodity prices already. In addition, we're anticipating input prices are going to go up because of them. What can we do as farmers to share the impact on trade policies that go it alone without our trade partners, but put farmers at the front lines of it, all the retaliation that's sure to come?
Well, I'm very disconcerted because for most of my life in the United States Senate, I've been a free trader and a fair trader, and I've always been in a majority of both Republicans and Democrats that tended to be for free trade. And now I'm in a minority. I'm not going to give up speaking about the importance of trade, particularly for agriculture, because every one of your people on here today and every one of your members know that in agriculture we produce about a third more than we consume domestically, and we have to export. And that's probably a bigger aspect of profitability in farming than anything else that Congress can do. So I'm taking exception to the president. I'm speaking publicly that I'm a free trader and how important free trade is. And one of the things that I'm trying to promote additional people to do, I'm bringing in a former person that had Eli's job here now, going way back to the 1980s. He was doing that job. He's involved in trade now in the private sector. But at one time from 2005, 6, 7, and 8, he was agricultural trade representative in the Special Trade Representative's office. And he has this fact. He starts out with a proposition that why do we always talk about China and India and Brazil and Europe and Japan and South Korea? Yes, they're a major impact and maybe we have major problems with them, but there's still other 190 countries on the face of this earth. So Al Johnson is telling my fellow senators as I get meetings set up for him that he negotiated with 12 different countries over 6 or 7 different free trade bills that he negotiated for George W. Bush. And those are fairly insignificant countries, but by that successful negotiation, we have improved our trade with them 600%. So in other words, he's saying, and I'm saying, that we ought to spend our time not just worrying about the big countries where maybe we'll never have satisfactory trading negotiations, although you don't give up on that, that we ought to spend some time where we can make some progress.
Well, Senator, that I'm glad to hear that, and I guess what I'm hearing from my all the farmer questions is that there's a lot of frustration and a lot of anger that they're not being heard by the administration about how important USDA investments are to rural America and to our farms on the ground. And we're trying to amplify how important this is to our farmers in our rural communities. And we're working with you and your office and our colleagues around in the Iowa delegation to make a real difference. How can we bring this voice to the forefront, knowing how much damage is being done when farmers can't rely on a good partner at USDA?
Well, for my voice as a member of the Senate Finance Committee, every time this Mr. Greer comes to my committee for an oversight hearing, I'm going to present the same issue you're hearing from your members this very day and try to get some promises from them. But I failed entirely under Ambassador Tai. In 4 years of the Biden administration, we made absolutely no progress there. And I think that both Trump 1, Trump 2, and Biden in between, being so protectionist, have fed this environment well beyond agriculture to a point where it turns members of Congress off to thinking about free trade agreements. And that's why I'm trying to get back on track through Al Johnson to tell his story that there's 190 other countries we ought to be negotiating with to get our trade impact up.
Well, and so Senator, I think we're working, trying to figure out how we can make the voice of Iowa farmers have a greater impact with the administration as they're making huge steps here that are having real impacts for our farmers and our rural communities. Do you feel like the Trump administration is listening to you and getting the message?
No, it's too early for me to draw any conclusion. But now I've had the opportunity this way to what you've heard me say today. I've had the opportunity through Mr. Greer, the new special trade representative, through Mr. Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce. Is there anybody else
Rollins.
Oh, yeah, and Secretary Rollins. These three people, the conversation I just had with your members, I had with them right here in this same office that I'm speaking to you from.
Well, very good. We're really want to just impress upon you all the questions I'm getting from our farmers is how critical the time is now to make sure that these resources that farmers are depending upon, that our rural communities are depending on, can really be there for them as we enter the growing season. So we really want to impress upon you how vulnerable people feel right now. So we really appreciate you sharing your time with us this morning. We know that we won't be able to get to all the questions farmers have today in our short amount of time, but you taking the time to be with us is very important. And we really appreciate that. So with all these challenges farmers are facing, low commodity prices, dealing with monopolies in our food system, farmer investments that are at risk with USDA firings and with all those challenges, and then the challenges of an upcoming growing season, what do you tell farmers to give them encouragement to stand up and make a difference to show the impact of these things on for our farmers and our communities? What encouragement or what advice do you give us to get that message out there?
Well, obviously, with talking to me and the other 5 members of the Iowa delegation as Iowa Farmers Union, the extent to which your views are similar to 3 or 4 other farm organizations, particularly on trade, but I think on most other things as well. The extent to which you can speak as one voice instead of farmers union separate from Farm Bureau or from Grange, et cetera, I think that would be very beneficial. And I think that keeping in touch with your congressmen and senators individually, and when you can't get a hold of Chuck Grassley, get a hold of Eli Hubbard as a substitute for me to get these things in. And don't be bashful about speaking too often. And also remember that there's some things out there, like for instance, the person that was laid off doing research on the bird flu at Iowa State or in Ames there. Somebody called in to tell us that. We wouldn't have known that. And just communication is very, very important. And when it comes to representative government, you can't have too much communication.
Well, we will encourage our members to do that, and Farmers Union will continue to speak out as loudly as we possibly can. And believe me, Senator, we are working hard with our partner organizations and our friends in other commodity groups and farm organizations, Iowa, to speak with as loud and as clear a voice as we can. Um, but we appreciate so much that you are willing to take the time to join us today and to offer your thoughts and as we think about our next steps. So thank you so much for your time, Senator. We really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And let me say in closing that a half hour like this with you is so convenient compared to my traveling the 99 counties every year like I do for my town meetings.
Right.
And a lot of times your members come to those town meetings and talk to us. But if I can communicate with whatever you had on here, 100 or 1,000 people today, that's better. And I'd like to do this in addition to all my travel around Iowa.
Well, we appreciate that. It's a good effort for us to try to spread the word through this venue, and you joined us before, and we'll look forward to you joining us again in the future.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Have a good day. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Iowa Farmers Union Town Hall with Senator Chuck Grassley. We've been so grateful that he was able to join us. We only can do this outreach and this work and this advocacy on behalf of family farmers by working together in one voice through the Iowa Farmers Union. If you haven't had a chance to join the Iowa Farmers Union, please do so today. We are advocating for family farming, for sustainable agriculture, and for thriving rural communities. And we are best able to do that if we can all work together. So thank you so much for joining us. I wanted just to remind you of a couple of announcements. This coming week, we will be at our Lunch and Learn. We'll be talking about support for farmers and landowners with the Iowa Finance Authority. And if you are interested in continuing the work on Iowa Farmers Union policy issues in even a more greater depth, please join our policy committee. We meet every 2 weeks during the legislative session and very often, and we would enjoy your participation in the Iowa Farmers Union policy process. So with that being said, I think we should conclude our work today. Thank you, Christina, for making all of this happen. And again, we'll say thank you to Senator Grassley for his joining us today to talk about federal farm issues in a very, very challenging time for our farmers and our rural communities. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.